Hello everyone, welcome to the Epic Flight Academy. My name's Mike Thompson, this is the Private Pilot Ground School, and today we're talking about oxygen systems. Remember, 3 keys for success to this program. The first one is to watch these videos. These videos parallel the online learning course. That's number 2. And the third key is review this content with your flight instructor. So what about oxygen systems? Systems that provide oxygen to the pilot and passengers as we go up in altitude. Now you remember the atmosphere is composed of, and these are very approximate numbers, about 80% nitrogen and roughly 20% oxygen. And as we go up in the atmosphere, the pressure is reduced, and so that these nitrogen and oxygen molecules are further and further apart. As I go up in the atmosphere, then I'm going to need supplemental oxygen systems. Well, why is that? There's still 20% of oxygen at the surface, there's 20% of oxygen at altitude. The difference is less pressure, and what we call partial pressure of that oxygen on the alveoli in my lungs. When I inhale, my body is getting less oxygen because of less partial pressure. Yes, there's still 20% oxygen, but I'm getting less of it because of lower partial pressure. So this has caused the FAA to do some research and write a regulation describing to pilots and flight crews exactly when they are required to use supplemental oxygen systems. We're going to find this regulation in 91.211. In 91.211, it talks about the requirement for pilots to use supplemental oxygen if they are above 12,500 feet up to and including 14,000 feet for 30 minutes or more. Now, 12,500 what? AGL, what altitude? It's important to remember these altitudes in 91.211 are MSL altitudes, altitude above mean sea level. So if I'm at 13,000 feet for 29 minutes, I'm still just barely legal. But as soon as that clock hits 30 minutes and I'm above 12.5, I need supplemental oxygen. The next part of the regulation talks about 14,000 feet. If I'm above 14,000 feet, MSL, the pilot and the crew are required to have oxygen the entire time. And the third part of this regulation talks about 15,000 feet. Above 15,000 feet, the passengers are required to be provided with oxygen. Now, they may or may not use it, but if I'm above 15,000, I have to have supplemental systems that I could provide oxygen to those passengers if need be. Many of us have probably traveled on a commercial airliner. Now, I don't know about you, but I never remember climbing out from Orlando Airport and at a certain altitude having to put on an oxygen mask. Now, I'm not talking about the emergency demo that the flight attendants talk about, cabin depressurization and so on. I'm talking about how come we're not wearing oxygen when I'm up at 36,000 feet sipping a cup of coffee on my way to San Francisco? Because that cabin is pressurized. Now, think about blowing up a balloon. We're going to blow up this airplane. And when I blow up this balloon and I put air pressure inside this balloon and this balloon starts to expand like that. Well, when I blow up this airplane, it certainly doesn't expand. the aircraft structure stays the same and the pressure builds up inside that structure, inside that cabin. And I can experience a much lower altitude while the aircraft is flying at a higher altitude. So I could fly at 36,000 feet, and because we've blown up this airplane like we blow up a balloon, I feel like I'm at 8,000 feet. If I'm just sitting in a chair in my living room or just lounging in this airline seat as I cross the country, sipping a cup of coffee, I'm perfectly comfortable. This diagram shows pressurization system for a small aircraft. Imagine something like a Cessna 210, for example. Some of the 210 models are pressurized. That's why they're called P210s. It might look something like this. That pressurized air is forced into that cabin, blown it up just like a balloon, but it doesn't expand like a balloon. It holds its structure and the pressure inside that cabin builds up. When that pressure reaches the amount that the pilot has requested on the pressure controller, the pressure controller opens this relief valve and keeps that cabin pressure at the requested pressure. Some of you are thinking, hey, what if that pressure control valve failed? Now, we're always thinking about redundancy in aircraft, and we're always thinking about what if, how do we keep things safe? If that valve failed and we continue to blow up that pressure, that pressurized 210, at some point there's going to be too much pressure. Something's going to give, something's going to break. We don't want that. Notice, in addition to that pressure control valve, there is an emergency pressure relief valve. At a certain preset pressure, no matter what the pilot asks for, that emergency valve will open and relieve pressure inside that cabin. Oxygen systems in any aircraft, no matter how big and complex or small and simple, can be divided up clearly into three main parts. The first part is an oxygen storage system. There's 4 types of oxygen storage systems. The second main part to an oxygen system is delivery. There's 3 primary ways that oxygen is delivered to pilots and passengers. And the third part that we talk about with oxygen systems are masks and cannulas. There are 4 major types of masks and cannulas. So right now what we want to talk about in a little bit more detail are the oxygen delivery systems. The first one is known as the continuous flow delivery system. The continuous flow system is named that because that's what it does. It delivers about 2.5 liters of oxygen per minute, no matter what altitude you're flying at. Now, that's more oxygen than you need at low altitudes, and it's not quite as much oxygen as you might need as you get up into higher altitudes above 10,000 feet. The advantage to this system is it's simple and it's cost effective. Well, the next type of delivery system is what we call the diluter-demand system. Now, this system solves some of those issues with the continuous flow system. The diluter-demand system does 2 things. First of all, it activates on demand. That means when I inhale, it sends oxygen, and when I exhale, it stops sending oxygen through the mask. The second thing that it does, and this is why it's called diluter, it mixes cabin air with that incoming oxygen to the pilot's mask. And the system knows how much cabin air to mix so that the pilot always gets the correct percentage up to about 40,000 feet. Now, the third type of system is called pressure demand. Now we're in a whole new ballgame. The pressure demand system delivers oxygen under pressure directly into the pilot's masks. This is made for high altitude flying. This is the type of thing you might also see on a fighter jet. Now, this system is interesting in that it is pushing oxygen under pressure into your mask, and literally it feels like it's blowing up your lungs like a balloon. So the pilot has to learn to really breathe in reverse. Normally when we breathe, when we flex our diaphragm, we inhale. And when we relax, we exhale. With my lungs being blown up like a balloon in a pressure demand system, the oxygen is forced through the mask into my lungs, and I actually have to use my diaphragm and force the air out to exhale, like I'm doing right now, so my voice sounds a little weird. And then when I relax, the pressure demand system automatically shoots pressurized oxygen through the mask and into my lungs. So, oxygen systems. 4 types of storage, 3 types of delivery, and 4 types of masks or cannulas. We've just reviewed the 3 primary types of oxygen delivery systems. Well, folks, that's it for systems. Join us next time.